Before we get started with the show, I just wanted to remind you that if you need help with your letter of intent, go to residencyhelp.com to look at the information there, and then let me know that you'd want to work with me one-on-one at tonythepharmacist@gmail.com. That's tonythepharmacist@gmail.com. All right, let's get started with the show. All right, welcome to the Pharmacy Residency Podcast, a member of the Pharmacy Podcast Network. I'm Tony Guerra, and I wanted to go over something called invisible labor, also known as invisible work, and I want to put it in the framework of APPEs and residency. When you're doing the work, you often make the assumption that the preceptor or residency director sees what you're doing, and no harm, no foul, right? So if you don't hear any complaints, then everything's going well. Then you get to the midpoint evaluation, and then you see that your midpoint evaluation is average or worse. And you say, well, how did this happen? I did all this work. You may be used to just putting your head down and getting the job done, but if you don't in some way communicate what that job is, then you're right in the middle, and that's not a place you want to be. You really want to be at the top 20%, and certainly avoid the bottom 20%, because when you're looking at someone who's going to give you a recommendation, you want the recommendation to be glowing. You want them to highly recommend you, not just recommend you. And some residency sites will eliminate all recommendations that are not highly recommend, that are just recommend or lower. So I want to give you 3 tips. First, talk about what is invisible labor, invisible work. And second, why does it matter, especially as it comes to recommendations and moving forward? And then what is it that you can do about it? So there is an invisible labor calculator, which is kind of interesting. And it's Amy Westervelt. I haven't read her book, but it's amywestervelt.com/unpaid-labor-calculator. And it's AMYWESTERVELT.com. And this is more about being a spouse at home, or someone who has to do cleaning, childcare, household scheduling, maybe even taking care of grandparents, the pet, maybe homeschooling and all of these things. And what it is a simple calculator that calculates how much it would cost someone else to do it. And you would be amazed at the price of some of the things that you might be doing at home if you do have kids. But what the idea is more that there are so many things that go unrewarded and unnoticed. And when it comes to recommendations, that's exactly the opposite of the place that you want to be. You want to be in a place where the person is glowing about you, remembers you 1 or 2 students later, and you're not coming back to them in December like, hey, I'd like a recommendation, and they like, gosh, were you here, or when were you here, and all of those things. So the way to do this is not to come every day and say, look what I did, look what I did, look what I did. That would just be annoying. But what you want to do is you first want to kind of get with yourself and understand why it matters so much to make clear what you're doing. And the way to do that is to establish check-in times. Okay, let's check in each morning to see what I'm supposed to do, and let's check in each day to see where I am. And the idea is to continuously get ahead, to continuously start looking for opportunities to do more, and to make clear, especially if the person isn't seeing what you're doing. So the further you are from the actual preceptor or the residency director on a daily basis, the more important this is. Obviously, if you're in a community pharmacy, they see you every day, they see you working hard, they see you doing a great job. A lot easier. But when you're in a giant institution or you're remote, how can you make sure that everything that you've done is recorded? And how can the person make sure that you're being productive each day also for their reporting? So why does it matter? It matters because a person's opinion of you comes from the perceived work that you did. And that may not be equal to the real work. Many of you are introverts, and many of you would not in any way highlight the things that you've done, even if they are positive. You have tremendous humility, which is a good trait to have, but The problem is that when it comes down to the midpoint evaluation and the ending evaluation, if you've been so humble that you just get the job done, well, that's great if you're an entrepreneur and you're doing it for yourself. But when you're trying to get someone's positive recommendation and one that can put you in the top box, that's not what you want to do. So what you can do about it is you really do want to have a daily check-in. And even if the second check-in is more of a reporting, so in the morning you actually have a meeting, you get together, you talk about things. In the afternoon, the student checks in or the resident checks in, says, hey, this is what I've done. You, as a resident, obviously you can do this on a weekly basis or even a monthly basis. But as an APPE student, you really need to make clear where you are at any given time in every project that is especially meaningful. Because for the most part, many preceptors, especially if they're not with you, are going to rely on just talking to a couple people, and those people need to be very clear that you are working as hard as you can during those. Now, I understand there's 4,000 residencies for 8,000 people. You've got a 50-50 shot off the top, but that depends. If you go to a school where the percentage of residency success is in the teens or 20s, well, you actually have to be way over the top as far as someone that's going to be phenomenal. And if you are from one of the top schools, well, you still have your cohort that you need to kind of be in that part where you're excellent and where you're continuing to keep the good name, I guess, of your college. Okay, so the one thing that I would absolutely recommend is, again, I know that the reporting isn't till mid the third week, usually on a Friday if you're doing a 5-week APPE, and then the last day. But I feel like, and I've heard this a lot of times, are there other things that I can do to make things better? And it depends on where you are. A lot of times the preceptor takes that as, well, do you think you're failing? No, I'm not asking whether I'm failing or not. I just want to really, really do a great job here. I want to do an extraordinary job, and I want to just rise above average. I want to rise above that middle point. So again, invisible work is something that many of you know, especially if you're a spouse at home, picking up the trash, getting things done, taking care of things, and nobody notices. And that is not acceptable when you're looking for a recommendation. You don't have to make huge saves. You just have to be consistent and reliable on a daily basis. But you need to make clear these are the things that you're doing. And you also need to start outperforming the people that came before you. Now, within the cycle, we're only in third or fourth APPE, but many preceptors that have been around a long time have seen many, many students, and they can judge, okay, well, you're kind of right in the middle, or you're way ahead of what normally someone does. And you can ask for that kind of feedback. Hey, if I were to be judged based on the people that you've seen before, where would I be? And then what would I need to move further? So again, make sure that invisible work becomes visible, or invisible labor becomes visible, so that when recommendation time comes, it's not any kind of a surprise, and you have documentation of all of the good things that you've done in APPE and residency, so that you can move on to whichever next phase is yours. Hey, thanks again for listening to the Pharmacy Residency Podcast. I do encourage you to go to residencyhelp.com, get on the mailing list. I'll send you out an email every Friday during residency season, but then afterwards, I'll still have a number of episodes on helping you get through residency itself. And then if you're somebody that's looking at residency in the future, I'll also have content for that as well. If you have a question, I'm pretty good about getting back to you. And if I don't have an answer, I will know someone that does. So thanks again for listening to the Pharmacy Residency Podcast. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, please do rate and review. It really matters in terms of our ability to reach more people. Thanks again.